Tonight, Iran in a free fall. The biggest uprising in years rocks the regime. Dozens killed, a communications blackout, and the world bracing for what comes next. Plus, an immigration firestorm in America. Protests grow over 2 ICE shootings as local officials clash with the White House. And a record flu season, big changes to vaccine recommendations, and new diet guidelines. What it all means and how to keep your family healthy. Plus, a new year and a shifting economy. What to watch in 2026 and how to keep your budget bulletproof. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Mass protests in Iran threaten the regime's grip on power. Good evening in Washington. I'm Michelle London. Well, what started 2 weeks ago as frustration over Iran's struggling economy is now a nationwide uprising. Mass demonstrations are happening across the country. At least 60 protesters, including children, have been killed and more than 2,000 detained. That's according to human rights watchdog group. Internet and phone lines were cut across major cities as the regime tries to silence the movement. President Trump warning Iran not to target protesters. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei firing back, telling Trump to, quote, focus on his own country. And amid the clash between governments, another movement is quietly gaining ground. Some Christian leaders say the crackdown is not stopping a growing spiritual revolution. Listen.
Every year, I said, things in Iran cannot get any worse. And then it does. Then spiritually, I say, this cannot get any better. People in Iran are so open to the gospel. And then it gets better. If you look at the number of salvation, if you look at our curve of number of people who have come to salvation, it starts small 25 years ago, but it's growing exponentially. It's amazing, the curve jumping. The number of people coming to Christ is growing exponentially.
And tonight, Iran's exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is urging the protests to continue with hopes that the nearly 50-year Islamic regime may be headed for collapse. Well, joining us now with more reaction from the Trump administration is senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright. Kelly, Iranian leader Ayatollah Khamenei says protesters are ruining their own streets to please President Trump. Why would he believe that?
Because he's taking a hardline approach against his own people. And the President of the United States, as well as the State Department, is quite aware of that. They're saying it's not about, these protests on the streets are not about the President of the United States. It's really about the Iranian people who are frustrated and angered by Khamenei and the hardliners there in the Iranian government who have spent so much money on water, on nuclear power, and Hezbollah and Hamas funding and fueling terrorist cells throughout the world, and not spending money on their people to improve its infrastructure. And now they're retaliating against the leader. And as a result of that, he can fire all the salvos that he wants at the President of the United States. The President, by the way, says that if the protests go on and Iranian people are hurt, he stands ready to exert military pressure. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know the president's actions or what he plans to do to retaliate against the protesters being attacked. But he has been very tough on Khamenei in the past. And so people are watching, and people on the streets of Iran are saying, yes, Mr. President, come help us.
Watching and waiting. All right, Kelly, switching gears to Venezuela, the president says he's canceling a second wave of attacks on the South American nation. However, the White House is continuing its maritime operations, seizing another oil tanker overnight. What comes next in the U.S. strategy here, Kelly?
It's all about establishing security, stability, and security throughout the entire Venezuela area. And as a result of that, the president and the State Department have stated that they will do everything that they have to do to ensure a transition. That means controlling the interests and the government operations of Venezuela for the foreseeable future. We don't know how long that will be, but the president has made it very clear in his latest Truth Social that the USA and Venezuela are working well together, quoting from him, and then working well together, especially as it pertains to rebuilding in a much bigger way. He wants to get more oil flowing. He wants to get more money for the Venezuelan people, as well as for those oil workers who will be from the United States, actually helping to build and rebuild the oil infrastructure there in Venezuela. And of course, he has Maduro in a jail waiting trial.
And Kelly, here at home, the fallout continues over that deadly confrontation between an ICE agent and protester Renee Nicole Good. Minnesota leaders say they've been cut out of the investigation entirely, and they're pleading with the White House to include local officials. Is the Trump administration budging on that position, and where does the investigation stand tonight?
Well, to answer your question, the Trump administration has not budged at all. The FBI is still conducting its own investigation. The federal government is conducting its own investigation, and they have not shared anything. According to the Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, the feds have not shared any evidence or evidentiary proceedings with the people on the ground who represent the state of Minnesota. Minnesota is actually reaching out to its own people and suggesting that anyone who witnessed what was going on to send things to their state government in order for them to conduct their own state level investigation of this tragic and unfortunate shooting that took place with an ICE agent killing a citizen of the United States there on the streets of Minneapolis.
All right, senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.
All right, in other news, people in Los Angeles are remembering the catastrophic fires that raged throughout the city a year ago. 31 people were killed and 57,000 acres burned. CBN's Paul Petit brings us that story.
For victims of the LA fires, what happened here in January of 2025 is forever a part of their lives.
I wish we could just turn back the hands of time. It doesn't feel like a year, it feels like yesterday.
At the time, Hurricane-force Santa Ana winds fueled flames that destroyed nearly 19,000 structures. Blake Mallon took these videos before he saw his Pacific Palisades home consumed.
I watched them pull out chainsaws out of their truck and tear out trees and try to prevent the jump and run hoses through my house and just, sit there. Couldn't keep it.
A year later, there's still plenty of blame to go around.
I had a hose in my hand when the water went out. I have a hydrant literally in front of my house. My house had sprinkler systems, right? You can see the Santa Ynez Reservoir from my backyard.
Rose Hayes was one of 200,000 residents evacuated. Today, she still needs food made available by Operation Blessing in Altadena.
All my pictures, everything was ashes.
Rebuilding here is at a trickle. Fewer than a dozen homes have been completely rebuilt, and only 13% of destroyed homes have been issued a building permit. Some Eaton fire victims have turned to living in campers. Veretta Heidelberg's home was one of 21 that burned on her street.
I have one friend that literally had vouchers and lived in 16 different hotels. Some of the hardships that people have experienced is unbelievable.
And a report just days ago, a startling admission by the new LA fire chief that the department watered down this after-action report on the Palisades fire to protect top brass.
This editing occurred prior to my appointment as fire chief, and I can assure you that nothing of this sort will ever again happen while I am fire chief.
In Pasadena, many gather to pray and worship. Lake Avenue Church has 90 families victimized by the fires, including orchestra director Dwayne Funderburk, whose home burned down.
I think really it seemed like the focus of it was to bring people together and to encourage them and to increase their faith in God.
For many here still picking up the pieces, the first anniversary of the fire offered a time to reflect and remember that even in tragedy, God is still moving.
That's God's way of saying, I've got you. I know what's going on in your world, and I have never left you.
In Los Angeles, Paul Petit, CBN News.
Such an important story there. Thank you so much, Paul. Well, coming up, flu cases hit a 25-year high. What to do to stay healthy. Plus, big changes to vaccines and food. The new guidelines from the White House. That's next. Welcome back. Flu season is surging, reaching levels the U.S. hasn't seen in 25 years. The CDC says doctor visits for fever, cough, and sore throat are at their highest level since the 1997 flu season. A new strain known as subclade K is driving the spike. So far, an estimated 11 million Americans have gotten sick, with over 120,000 hospitalized and 5,000 deaths reported. Doctors urge vaccination, saying there's still time to get protected, adding that even partial immunity could prevent severe illness or hospitalization. Well, here to break it all down, CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson joins us now. Thank you so much, Lori, and welcome. What exactly is driving these cases? Is it the new strain, low vaccination rates, or something else?
Well, it's the new strain. Yes, vaccination rates are down, but for sure it's that new strain. That subclade K is what it's called. The subclade K strain is not in this year's flu vaccine. And the reason is because it takes about 6 months to make the vaccine. So they start making the vaccine in about March or April, and they look to the Southern Hemisphere and Australia and see what kind of strains are circulating at that time. And subclade K was not among them. And then that variant developed, and that's the one that 91% of people who have the flu have the subclade K, and that's not in the flu shot. Wow. So it's really a mismatch this year. It happens sometimes, but it's still worth getting the flu shot, doctors say. It does take a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, for all the antibodies to develop. So you're not fully protected, but sometimes the flu season can go all the way through April. So it is worthwhile, according to many doctors. It will keep you from having that severe disease or being hospitalized or possibly even dying. We have seen thousands of deaths from the flu this year already.
Very interesting. With cases still rising, how can people best protect themselves and their families right now beyond just getting the flu shot?
Well, the best thing we can do, we remember from COVID, wash those hands, wash them and sing happy birthday twice. And another huge thing is get plenty of rest. Our body heals itself when we're sleeping. Another thing, exercise. Exercise is great because if you sweat, it gets those toxins out, but also it's a stress reliever, and stress really impacts our immune system. Another thing, eat right, and if you do get sick, please stay away from everyone else. It seems like everyone has the flu these days, and oh, doesn't it drive you crazy when people you work with come to work sick? So, and then you can always wear a mask if you are sick, or even if you want to prevent getting sick. Sounds like a lot of the same rules we talked about during COVID, right, London?
Yes, and also stay away. I like how you said stay away when you're sick. That's very true. At the same time, the Trump administration just rolled out a major change to childhood vaccine guidance, including no longer broadly recommending the flu shot. What's behind this decision, Lori, and how are doctors responding?
Boy, this is so controversial, and doctors overall are not responding very well. The reason they decided to drastically reduce the number of recommended vaccines is because there really wasn't the data to support that they're necessary. And so we're talking about a reduction of vaccines from 17 to 11 different diseases. The flu, like you mentioned, COVID-19, no longer recommended, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, meningococcus, and those things. But remember, they're recommendations. They're just recommendations. So if you still want to get these vaccines for your child, you can. And talk to your pediatrician in particular to see if this is something your pediatrician recommends for your child.
All right, Lauren, really quickly, this week, the White House also rolled out new dietary guidelines. What are the biggest changes you see?
Well, these were a long time coming. That old food pyramid was a hot mess. You may remember that the old food pyramid recommended eating 6 to 11 servings a day of bread, of grains, pasta, tortillas, corn chips. which was ridiculous. And so it was basically flipped upside down. And now they're recommending that protein and vegetables are what we should consume most of. One of the biggest changes is, of course, that, but also recommending full-fat dairy, and rather than the low-fat dairy, and as I said, protein, full-fat protein. So a lot of cardiologists are a little bit concerned about that because they're like, hey, wait a second, not so much steak, not so much hamburger, not so much pork, because of the cholesterol concerns. So there is a little bit of controversy there, but also another big they're also recommending people stay away from processed foods and added sugars.
All right, so protein and vegetables. Lori, thank you so much for your insight. All right, up next, what does 2026 hold for your wallet? A financial analyst joins us with his predictions and smart ways to bulletproof your budget this year. All right, welcome back. It's a new year, and for many families, that means new financial goals and some uncertainty ahead. So how can you steward your finances wisely in the year ahead? To help answer that, let's bring in Stephen Cates. He's the financial analyst for Bankrate.com. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Today's job report shows that hiring has slowed down, but what does that mean for your economic outlook for 2026?
So coming into 2026, we still need to get a few more months of data to really get a sense of what the economy is doing following the government shutdown. There was a lot of disruptions and distortions from that. So this December report is the first in probably a few steps towards getting away from the shadow of that shutdown. But what I think people should think about is really twofold. One, from an investment standpoint, it's still a good time to be in the market. Both growth expectations and net profit margins for U.S. stocks are still strong. If you haven't been diversified outside U.S. stocks, now's the time. International stocks did very well last year. Other alternative investments like precious metals also were quite productive. So, take a chance now to look at your investments and look at your finances and make a start to make adjustments that are going to put you on the right foot forward. For anybody who is thinking about finding a job or switching jobs, it's still a tough time. And so it's natural to feel frustrated. That should start to ease over the course of this year, but we're all going to have to be pretty patient.
Well, that's a positive thing to know that it's a good time to be in the market still. What are some specific steps families can take right now to bulletproof their budgets, especially with prices still high in key areas like groceries and rent?
For a lot of people, they're budgeting on a monthly basis. It's a lot harder to think of how to plan out your spending your income across an entire year's salary. And so because of that, we've got an interesting opportunity for anybody who gets their paycheck on the 2nd or had gotten their paycheck on the 2nd of January. You're going to get 3 paychecks this year if you get paid bi-weekly, 3 paychecks this month if you get paid bi-weekly. Anybody who gets a paycheck on the 9th, you're going to have to wait till May for that little benefit. But getting that extra paycheck, is something that probably will exceed what you expected to be spending in your monthly bills. So cash that check somewhere, pay down debt, pad your emergency fund, add to your retirement savings, but utilize that money and don't spend it before you get it, because you can use that as an opportunity to take a step ahead early on in the year. Second, a lot of people are probably going to get a slightly larger tax refund this April than they got last year. So again, don't spend that money before you get it. Start to plan out ways that you can use that to take a step forward in your finances.
Great advice there.
Payment, emergency fund, whatever that's going to be, now's the time.
Great advice there. What's the biggest financial mistake you often see people making in uncertain economic times like this? And how can they avoid this in this year?
Well, there's no shortage of mistakes, but I think that for anybody who doesn't have an emergency fund, it is really essential that you put a little bit of cash away just to give you a cushion about those what ifs in life. You don't want to have an unexpected expense put you into debt on your credit cards or some kind of lending situation. That's just too simple to avoid. So putting even just a little bit of money away can give you a little bit of confidence that an emergency is just going to be an inconvenience rather than put you into credit card debt or otherwise.
Well, for people trying to grow their savings or boost their income this year, Stephen, where should they focus and what should they avoid?
So it's really tough for a lot of people now who are feeling like costs are rising and they're having to really find these extra dollars to cover rising grocery prices or other prices altogether. But the tough thing about this is that you can only cut so deeply into your expenses. And for most people, they're going to get more out of trying to figure out ways to raise their income to cover these expenses or grow their savings than they are by continuing to try to cut deeper and deeper into what they spend. The adage or the common thought that you can just skip Starbucks or avoid your avocado toast is just nonsense. Those little things are not going to suddenly allow you to do a down payment on a home or to pay for a new car. But trying to grow your income, finding ways to get additional income is going to be the best way to try to put yourself in a better financial position.
All right, some very helpful advice there. Thank you so much, Stephen Cates.
My pleasure.
The Christmas spirit lives on. How the Eastern world is marking the most wonderful time of the year. That's next. All right, finally tonight, if you are among the many who have not taken down your Christmas tree decorations, you might actually be right on time, depending on where you live. Christians around the world kicked off Orthodox Christmas earlier this week. In Bethlehem, observers took to the streets to celebrate the holiday. It was a momentous occasion for Christians in the Holy Land and one of the first major Christmas celebrations since the war ended in Gaza.
We have reignited the spirit of Christmas. We're sending hope to the people of Bethlehem, to the people of Palestine, to the people of Gaza. And also, we're telling the whole world that we are ready to receive you here in Bethlehem.
Well, January 7th marks the start of Orthodox Christmas for Christians who follow the ancient calendar. Similar celebrations took place across Russia, Serbia, and Egypt. Well, that's going to do it today for Faith Nation. We will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.